He grabbed her by the collar in front of a packed bar, loud, angry, confident nobody would stop him. Chairs scraped. The room went dead silent. Then the man in the black suit stood up, and the manager realized he'd just touched the wrong woman in the wrong place. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. All right, let's get back into it. Liv Perez moved through Rosa's tavern like water. Present, but never making waves. Her dark uniform blended with the mahogany bar, and that white collar she always kept crisp seemed to make her disappear into the polished wood and amber lighting. She'd perfected the art of professional invisibility over 2 years of double shifts, eyes attentive, movements efficient, never lingering too long, never drawing unnecessary attention. That was the key to surviving when you had responsibilities bigger than pride. The Friday evening crowd filled the tavern with comfortable noise, clinking glasses, easy laughter, the low murmur of conversations that had been happening in these same booths for decades. Neon beer signs glowed soft blue and amber against dark wood paneling. The air smelled like draft beer, grilled burgers, and the faint sweetness of bourbon. Rosa's wasn't fancy, but it was steady. Reliable. The kind of place where regulars knew each other's names and tipped in cash. Liv knew every corner of this room. She knew Mr. Patterson always ordered his whiskey neat, at exactly 6:47 p.m. She knew the couple in booth 3 celebrated their anniversary here every month. She knew which tables tipped 20% and which ones barely left 5, and she knew Killian Waters. He sat alone at table 7, the corner booth with the best view of the entire bar. His black suit fit him like it cost more than Liv made in 3 months. Dark hair slicked back, sharp jawline, and tattoos that crawled up his neck in precise geometric patterns, the kind of ink that suggested stories Liv had never asked about. His presence didn't announce itself with volume. It was subtler than that, quieter, dangerous in the way a sleeping wolf is dangerous. When Killian entered Rosa's, conversations didn't stop. They just lowered, shifted. People made space without realizing they were doing it. Liv picked up her serving tray and crossed the worn wooden floor toward his table. Her black shoes were scuffed but polished. Her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Professional, composed, always. "Evening," she said, setting a napkin down. "The usual?" Killian's dark eyes lifted to meet hers. "Please, anything to eat tonight?" "Not yet." He paused, studying her face with the kind of attention most customers never bothered with. "Long shift?" "Every shift is long, Mr. Waters." Liv's voice carried the practiced politeness of someone who'd answered 1,000 variations of the same question. "But I'm not complaining. You never do." Something in his tone made her pause. Not flirtation, not pity, just observation. The kind that made her feel seen in a way that was both uncomfortable and strangely reassuring. Before she could respond, a sharp voice cut through the ambient noise. "Perez." Liv's shoulders tensed imperceptibly. She didn't turn immediately. Didn't need to. She'd learned to recognize authority by the way it demanded attention. Jack Jonas stood near the bar, arms crossed over his black polo shirt, his expression carved from stone and irritation. He was broad-shouldered, built like someone who'd played college football, and never quite let go of that identity. His dark hair was cropped military short, and his jaw carried the permanent set of someone constantly proving something. He'd been the new manager for exactly 3 days. 3 days of new rules, new expectations, new ways to remind everyone that Rosa's wasn't a family anymore. It was a business, and he was running it. "I need to speak with you," Jack said, his voice pitched just loud enough to carry across nearby tables. "Now." Liv glanced at Killian briefly, an apology in her eyes, then set her tray on the bar and walked toward Jack. She kept her expression neutral. Her hands relaxed at her sides. Years of customer service had taught her that body language mattered more than words. "Yes, Mr. Jonas?" Jack's eyes flicked toward table 7, then back to her. "How long were you talking to that customer?" "I was taking his order, sir. Same as I do every night." "Looked like more than that to me." Jack stepped closer, lowering his voice to something meant only for her ears, except his volume control was terrible, and half the bar could still hear him. "We've talked about this. Twice. No personal conversations with customers. No lingering. You take orders, you deliver them, you move on. Are we clear?" Liv's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Crystal clear, sir. I don't think you are. Jack's expression hardened. Because this is the third time I've had to remind you. Maybe you think the rules don't apply to you. Maybe you think because you've been here longer than me, you get special treatment. That's not... I'm not finished. Jack's voice rose again, and now the entire bar was listening. Customers at nearby tables exchanged glances. The bartender, Tommy, froze mid-pour. Even the music from the jukebox seemed quieter. You're here to work, Perez, not to chat, not to make friends, not to waste time. You're here to do your job. Liv's breathing stayed controlled. Her hands remained still. But inside, something cold settled in her chest, the familiar weight of humiliation delivered publicly, of boundaries crossed in the name of authority. I understand, Mr. Jonas. Her voice was quiet, respectful. Everything 2 years of survival had taught her to be. Do you? Jack stepped even closer now, invading the professional distance that should exist between a manager and his staff. His eyes narrowed. Because I'm starting to think words aren't enough with you. That's when his hand shot out. His fingers grabbed the front of Liv's uniform, twisting the fabric as he shoved her backward. Her spine hit the wooden pillar behind the bar with a solid thud, not brutal, but unmistakably aggressive. Public. Meant to be witnessed. Do you understand me now? Jack snarled, his face inches from hers. The entire tavern went silent. Liv's brown eyes stayed locked on his. Her expression didn't crumble, didn't plead, but her hands, pressed flat against the pillar, trembled with the effort of staying calm. Somewhere behind Jack, a chair scraped against the floor. Slowly, deliberately, the sound cut through the silence like a blade. Killian Waters stood up. Liv Perez had learned control the hard way, not through books or therapy or well-meaning advice from people who'd never missed a meal. She'd learned it at 17, standing in a hospital hallway at 2 a.m., listening to a doctor explain that car accidents don't care about good people or bad timing, or little brothers who still needed their sister. She'd learned it when the social worker asked if there was anyone else, any other family, any other option besides a 12-year-old boy going into the system, while his 18-year-old sister figured out how to become a parent overnight. There wasn't, so Liv became one. That was 5 years ago. 5 years of double shifts and skipped meals, and learning that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. 5 years of watching her little brother, Tommy named after their grandfather, not the bartender, grow from a scared kid into a young man who still needed groceries and school supplies and someone to sign permission slips. The apartment they shared was small. Third-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better decades. The heat worked inconsistently. The neighbors were loud, but the rent was manageable, and the landlord didn't ask questions when Liv paid in cash every month, exactly on time. This morning had started like every other. Liv woke at 5:30 a.m. to her phone alarm, the generic one, because she'd learned that sentimental ringtones made it harder to wake up. She showered quickly, dressed in the dark so she wouldn't wake Tommy, and made breakfast for both of them. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice that was on sale last week. Tommy shuffled into the kitchen at 6:15, his dark hair sticking up in 3 different directions, still wearing the basketball shorts he'd slept in. At 17, he was already taller than Liv by 4 inches, all long limbs and teenage metabolism. He looked so much like their father it hurt sometimes. "Morning," he mumbled, dropping into the chair across from her. "Morning." Liv slid a plate in front of him. "You have that chemistry test today, right?" "Yeah." Tommy shoveled eggs into his mouth like he hadn't eaten in days. "Studied last night." "I know. I heard you." She'd heard him pacing in his room, muttering formulas to himself, the same way she used to before her own exams back when college was still something she thought she'd have time for. Tommy glanced at her, guilt flickering across his face. "Sorry. Was I too loud?" "No." Liv smiled, the real kind she saved for him. "You're fine. I'm just glad you're taking it seriously. You sound like a mom." "Yeah, well." Liv picked up her own plate, barely touched. Her appetite had been inconsistent lately. Too much stress, not enough sleep. Someone has to. The joke fell flat. It usually did, because it wasn't really a joke, and they both knew it. Tommy set his fork down, his expression shifting into that careful seriousness that made him look older than 17. "Liv, you okay?" "I'm fine. You've been picking up extra shifts again. Tips are good right now." She stood, carrying her plate to the sink. "Tourist season. It's January." "Business travelers, then." Liv rinsed the dishes, her hands moving through the familiar motions. "Don't worry about it, Tommy. I've got it handled." He didn't look convinced. But he also didn't push. They'd learned early that pushing each other only led to fights neither of them could afford emotionally or otherwise. Liv left for work at 7 a.m. Tommy left for school at 7:30. The same routine they'd perfected over 5 years of making it work. Except lately, making it work felt harder. The rent had gone up last month. Tommy needed new shoes. His current ones had a hole in the sole he kept trying to hide. The electricity bill had spiked because winter meant the ancient radiator worked even less than usual, and the space heaters worked overtime. Her phone screen was cracked, her car needed an oil change she kept delaying, and her last trip to the dentist had revealed 2 cavities she couldn't afford to fill yet. None of it was catastrophic, but all of it added up. That's what people who'd never been poor didn't understand. It wasn't the big emergencies that broke you. It was the slow accumulation of small ones. The constant mental math. The decision between fixing the car now or paying the electric bill on time. The choice between buying groceries or replacing worn-out work shoes. Liv was good at the math. She'd been doing it for 5 years. But lately, the numbers weren't adding up the way they used to, which was why she couldn't afford to lose her job at Rosa's Tavern. She'd arrived at the bar at 10 a.m. for the lunch shift, worked through the afternoon lull, and stayed for the evening rush. 8 hours on her feet. 9 if you counted the 30-minute break she'd spent helping Tommy with his math homework over FaceTime. Her feet ached, her lower back throbbed, but she smiled at customers, refilled drinks, cleared tables, and pocketed tips with the same professional efficiency she'd perfected over 2 years. She liked Rosa's, liked the regulars who remembered her name, liked Tommy the bartender, who covered for her when she needed to take a call from Tommy's school, liked the predictability of it, the way she could walk in and know exactly what needed to be done. And then Jack Jonas had arrived. 3 days ago, the owner had called a staff meeting. Short notice. Everyone required to attend. New management, the owner had announced, gesturing to the man standing beside him. Jack Jonas. He's going to be running day-to-day operations from now on. Listen to him like you'd listen to me. Jack had nodded, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. The words were polite, professional, but his eyes told a different story. Liv had recognized that look. She'd seen it before in managers who viewed staff as problems to be solved rather than people to be led. The kind who believed respect was something you demanded, not earned. She'd kept her expression neutral, smiled when appropriate, nodded in the right places, and she'd hoped quietly, desperately that she was wrong. But 3 days later, standing in Rosa's Tavern with Jack's hand twisted in her uniform, her back pressed against a wooden pillar, the entire bar watching in horrified silence, Liv knew she'd been right. And she knew that control, the thing she'd spent 5 years perfecting, was about to slip through her fingers, because sometimes, no matter how calm you stayed, the world grabbed you anyway. The grip on Liv's uniform hadn't loosened. Jack's fingers were still twisted in the fabric, his knuckles white with the force of it. His face remained inches from hers, jaw clenched, eyes demanding the submission he believed he'd earned simply by existing in a position of authority. But something had shifted in the room. The silence had changed texture, gone from shocked to dangerous. Liv felt it before she saw it, the way the air pressure seemed to drop, the way peripheral movement stopped entirely. Even the jukebox had gone quiet, the last notes of some forgotten country song fading into nothing. Jack felt it too. She watched his expression flicker confusion first, then irritation at being interrupted in the middle of making his point. "Something you need?" Jack called out without turning, his voice still sharp with manufactured authority. No response. Just the steady sound of footsteps, deliberate, unhurried. Jack finally released Liv's uniform and turned. Killian Waters stood 6 feet away. Up close, he was even more imposing than from across the room. The tattoos on his neck were intricate geometric patterns that suggested precision, planning, permanence. His dark suit caught the amber light from the bar, perfectly tailored to shoulders that didn't need padding. His hands hung relaxed at his sides, but there was nothing casual about his posture. He looked at Jack the way someone might look at a stain on expensive furniture. "Take your hands off her," Killian said quietly. Jack blinked, then laughed a short, sharp sound designed to reassert dominance through dismissiveness. "This is staff business. Not your concern. I'm making it my concern." "Then you can leave." Jack straightened to his full height, which was considerable 6'2" of former college athlete bulk. "This is my bar, my staff, my rules. You don't like how I run things. There's a dozen other places you can drink. Killian's expression didn't change. Your bar? Something in his tone made Jack hesitate. The owner hired me to manage it, Jack said, though his voice had lost a fraction of its certainty. Which means you work here. Killian took one step closer. Just one, but the effect was seismic. Like she does. Difference is, she knows her place. You clearly don't. Jack's face flushed red. You threatening me? Educating you. The tension snapped tighter. Two men facing each other in a crowded bar, one believing he had power, the other knowing he did. Liv pressed herself flatter against the pillar, her heart hammering. This was escalating in ways she hadn't anticipated, couldn't control. She wanted to speak, to de-escalate, to do what she always did, smooth things over, make herself smaller, let the situation diffuse naturally, but her voice wouldn't come. You've got 3 seconds to walk away, Jack said, his hand moving toward his belt, not to a weapon, but to his phone. Or I'm calling the cops. Killian smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Go ahead. Jack's hand froze. Around them, the bar held its collective breath. Regulars who'd been watching from their tables now leaned back slightly, instinctively creating distance. Tommy the bartender had both hands flat on the bar, his knuckles white. The blonde woman at table 4 had her hand over her mouth. The older man in the gray shirt looked like he wanted to leave but couldn't make his legs work. That's what I thought, Jack said, misreading Killian's stillness as retreat. Now sit down, finish your drink, and mind your business. This conversation is over. No. Killian's voice remained calm, flat, final. It's not. Before Jack could respond, movement flickered in Liv's peripheral vision. 2 men had appeared near the exits. She hadn't seen them enter, hadn't noticed them moving, but now they were just there. One by the front door, casual in a dark jacket. Another near the back hallway, hands in his pockets. Both watching, both waiting. Jack noticed them too. His eyes darted between the 2 men, then back to Killian. What is this? A teaching moment. Killian took another step forward. Now he was close enough that Jack had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. You put your hands on someone under my protection. That's a problem. Jack's laugh was forced now, edged with something that might have been fear. She's a waitress, not your property. No, she's a person. Killian's voice dropped lower. Quieter. More dangerous. Which is apparently something you forgot. I was enforcing workplace standards. By assaulting her? I didn't assault anyone. Jack's voice rose, defensive now. I grabbed her uniform. It's not the same thing. Tell that to the room. Killian gestured to the silent witnesses surrounding them. Tell them you had every right. See if they agree. Jack opened his mouth, closed it, looked around at the faces, watching him horrified, disgusted, pitying. Not one showed support. His authority was evaporating in real time. This is ridiculous, Jack muttered, but the conviction was gone. I'm the manager. I was doing my job. Your job is to manage a business, not to put your hands on people who can't fight back. Killian leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper now, but in the silence of the bar, every word carried. Let me be very clear, Mr. Jonas. You don't touch her again. You don't raise your voice at her again. You don't look at her wrong again. Are we understood? Jack's jaw worked, pride warring with survival instinct. Are we understood? This isn't over, Jack said finally, but the words were hollow, empty of real threat. It is. Killian straightened. You just don't know it yet. He turned his back on Jack, a deliberate insult, a display of dismissal, and looked at Liv. His expression softened imperceptibly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but she saw it. You okay? He asked. Liv nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Killian held her gaze for another moment, then walked back to table 7 and sat down as if nothing had happened. The bar slowly exhaled. Jack stood frozen, humiliation and rage painting his face in equal measure. His fists clenched. His breathing came hard and fast. Then he turned and walked toward the back office, his footsteps heavy with barely contained fury. The door slammed behind him. Conversations slowly resumed, forced, uncomfortable, but present. Liv pushed away from the pillar, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. Tommy the bartender caught her eye. You good? She nodded again. Still couldn't speak. Because she knew something the rest of the room didn't. This wasn't over. It had barely begun. Chapter 4. Warnings and Watching Eyes. The next morning, Liv arrived at Rose's tavern 30 minutes early. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Jack's hand twisting in her uniform, felt the pillar against her spine, heard the silence of the bar watching her humiliation. She'd replayed Killian's intervention over and over, trying to understand what it meant, what it would cost her. Because protection always had a price. She'd learned that early. Nothing came free. Especially not for people like her. People who couldn't afford lawyers or backup plans, or the luxury of standing up for themselves without calculating the consequences first. The tavern was empty except for Tommy, who was restocking beer behind the bar. He looked up when she entered, relief crossing his weathered face. "Wasn't sure you'd come back," he admitted. "Can't afford not to." Liv tied her apron with practiced efficiency. "Is he here yet?" She didn't need to specify who he was. Tommy shook his head. "Office is locked, but he left new rules posted on the staff board." Liv walked to the small employee area near the kitchen. A laminated sheet hung on the corkboard, printed in bold Arial font. Rose's Tavern, updated workplace standards. Effective immediately. 1. No personal conversations with customers exceeding 30 seconds. 2. All tips to be pooled and redistributed by management. 3. No staff breaks during peak hours, 5 p.m., 10 p.m. 4. Uniform inspections daily before shift start. 5. 2 warnings maximum before disciplinary action. Compliance is mandatory, no exceptions. Management. Liv read it twice. Each line felt like a hand tightening around her throat. The tip pooling was the worst. Tips were how she made rent. Her base pay barely covered groceries. Jack knew that. Every server knew that. This wasn't about fairness or teamwork, it was about control. About reminding them who held power. "He can't do this," said Maria, the other day shift waitress, appearing beside Liv with her jacket still on. She was older, mid-40s, with 2 kids and a mortgage. "The tips? That's illegal in this state." "Is it?" Liv asked quietly. "I think so." Maria's certainty wavered. "Maybe. I don't know. But it's not right. Right and legal aren't always the same thing." Liv unpinned the notice and folded it into her pocket. "And complaining only makes it worse, so we just take it?" Liv didn't answer. Because the truth was, yes, that's exactly what people like them did. They took it, swallowed their pride, and kept showing up because missing one paycheck meant choosing between rent and electricity. The lunch shift passed in tense silence. Jack emerged from the office at noon, clipboard in hand, observing them with the focused attention of someone documenting infractions. He said nothing to Liv directly, didn't need to. His presence was the threat. Every time Liv approached a table, she felt his eyes tracking her, timing her, waiting for the excuse he needed. She kept her conversations transactional. Water refills, order taking, check delivery. 30 seconds maximum, just like the rule stated. She smiled less, made no small talk. Became exactly the kind of server she'd never wanted to be: invisible, mechanical, forgettable. It felt like drowning in slow motion. At 2 p.m., during the afternoon lull, Jack called her to the back. "Perez, office, now." Liv's stomach dropped. She glanced at Tommy, who looked worried but helpless, then followed Jack into the cramped office that smelled like old paperwork and stale coffee. Jack closed the door. Not all the way. Just enough for privacy. Just enough to be threatening. "Sit," he ordered, gesturing to the plastic chair across from the desk. Liv remained standing. "I'd prefer not to, sir." His eyes narrowed. "That wasn't a request." She sat. Jack leaned against the desk, arms crossed, looking down at her with the practiced superiority of someone who'd learned management from YouTube videos and military movies. "Yesterday was unfortunate," he began, his tone suggesting he believed no such thing. "Tensions ran high. Things got out of hand." Liv said nothing. "But we're professionals here, so I'm willing to move past it provided we establish some clear boundaries going forward." "Boundaries," Liv repeated carefully. "That customer, the one in the suit." Jack's jaw tightened saying it. "Killian Waters. You're not to speak with him anymore." Liv's hands gripped the edge of her chair. "He's a regular customer. I serve him like I serve everyone else." "Not anymore. Someone else can take his table. Mr. Jonas, this isn't negotiable." Jack pushed off the desk, pacing the small space. "I don't know what kind of arrangement you have with him, and frankly I don't care. But it stops. Today. He makes trouble, and I won't tolerate staff who attract trouble." The accusation hung in the air, ugly, deliberate, designed to make her feel dirty. "There's no arrangement," Liv said quietly, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. "I take his order, that's all. Then it should be easy to let someone else do it. And if he requests my section? Then you politely inform him that's not possible and suggest he sit elsewhere." Jack stopped pacing and leaned down, his face too close to hers. "Am I being clear enough, Perez? Or do I need to use smaller words?" The insult landed like a slap. Liv stood, needing distance, needing air. "Crystal clear, sir." "Good." Jack straightened, satisfied. "Now get back to work. And Perez, consider this your second warning. One more, and we're done." She left the office with her dignity barely intact. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Liv moved mechanically, taking orders, delivering food, clearing tables. She avoided table 7 entirely, even though it remained empty all afternoon. Killian didn't come in for lunch. By 5 p.m., the evening crowd started arriving. The tavern filled with familiar faces and comfortable noise. Liv found herself scanning the entrance obsessively, torn between hoping Killian would appear and praying he wouldn't, because if he sat in her section again, she'd have to refuse him. And if she refused him, Jack would know she'd complied. And if she complied, she'd be admitting that Jack's intimidation worked. At 6:47 p.m., the door opened. Killian Waters walked in. He wore the same black suit, the same measured confidence. His eyes found Liv immediately, a brief acknowledgement, nothing more. Then he walked to table 7 and sat down. Liv's heart hammered. Across the bar, Jack emerged from the office, clipboard in hand. His eyes locked on table 7, then on Liv. Waiting. Testing. Maria leaned over. "Want me to take him?" It would be so easy. Just let someone else serve him. Follow the rule. Keep her job. Survive another day. But something in Liv refused to bend. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was principle. Maybe it was just exhaustion at being pushed around by men who mistook cruelty for leadership. "No," Liv said quietly. "He's my table." She picked up her notepad and crossed the floor. Jack's expression darkened. When Liv reached table 7, Killian looked up. His dark eyes studied her face, reading the tension there, the fear she was trying to hide. "Evening," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The usual?" Killian nodded slowly. "Please." Behind the bar, Jack wrote something on his clipboard. Liv didn't need to see it to know what it said. Third warning. The atmosphere in Rose's tavern on Friday night was electric. Not the good kind of electric, not the buzz of a crowd enjoying themselves, celebrating the end of a work week with drinks and laughter. This was different, tighter, the kind of energy that precedes storms. Liv felt it the moment she walked in for the evening shift. The bar was packed, every table occupied, every booth filled, standing room only near the dartboard. The jukebox played too loud, trying to cover the tension no one wanted to acknowledge. Conversations were forced, laughter a half-second too late. Everyone knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. Jack stood behind the bar like a general surveying troops, his clipboard ever present, his expression carved from stone in satisfaction. He'd been documenting everything for 3 days now, every interaction, every conversation, every second Liv spent at any table, building his case. Liv tied her apron with hands that trembled slightly. She'd considered calling in sick, had actually picked up her phone twice that morning, finger hovering over Tommy, the bartender's number, but she'd thought about her brother, the real Tommy, the one who needed new shoes and 3 meals a day, and she'd put the phone down. You didn't get to quit when quitting meant losing everything. Maria touched her shoulder as she passed. "Careful tonight," she whispered. "He's in a mood." Liv nodded. She could see it in the set of Jack's jaw, the way his eyes tracked her every movement. He was waiting for his moment. And in a bar this crowded, with this many witnesses, he'd have it. Table 7 was occupied when Liv started her shift. Killian sat in his usual spot, but tonight he wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, one in a dark jacket with silver hair, the other younger, built like he spent his life in a gym. They weren't eating, weren't drinking much, just present, watching. Liv approached their table with her notepad, her professional mask firmly in place. "Evening, gentlemen. Can I start you off with—" "Just water," Killian said, cutting her off gently. His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. For all of us, it was a message. She understood it immediately. "Don't give him ammunition. Stay brief. Stay safe. 3 waters, coming right up." She turned to leave, but Killian spoke again. "Miss Perez." She paused. "How are you?" 2 words, A simple question. The kind customers asked servers 1,000 times a night without meaning it, but Killian meant it, and Jack was watching. Liv felt the weight of the entire bar's attention shift toward her. Conversations lowered. People at nearby tables stopped pretending they weren't listening. "I'm fine, thank you," she said, keeping her voice level. "Professional. I'll get those waters." She walked away before he could respond, before Jack could add another mark to his clipboard, before the moment could stretch into something she couldn't control. Behind the bar, Tommy poured the waters without being asked. He'd been watching too. "He's going to fire you," Tommy said quietly, sliding the glasses across. "You know that, right?" "Probably. So why are you still talking to that guy?" Liv picked up the tray. "Because Jack doesn't get to tell me how to do my job. Not like this. Pride's expensive, Liv. So is dignity." She balanced the tray and headed back across the floor. The next 2 hours passed in mounting tension. Liv served her tables with mechanical efficiency orders taken, drinks delivered, checks processed. She spoke when spoken to, smiled when appropriate, stayed within every boundary Jack had drawn, but she didn't avoid table 7. Every time Killian or his companions needed something, she was there. Water refills, extra napkins, the check when they asked for it. Each interaction was brief, professional, and completely within workplace standards, and each one made Jack angrier. She could see it in the way his grip tightened on his clipboard, the way his jaw clenched when she approached that corner booth. He wanted her to slip up, to give him the clear violation he needed, but she wouldn't, couldn't. At 8:30 p.m., during peak rush, everything changed. Liv was clearing table 4. The blonde woman and her husband had just left when she heard Killian's voice behind her. "Miss Perez, when you have a moment." She turned. He was standing now, his 2 companions still seated. The crowd pressed close in the packed bar, bodies navigating narrow spaces between tables. "Of course," Liv said, setting down her tray of dirty dishes. "What can I—" "Everything all right with your order?" someone asked loudly from across the bar. Several heads turned, including Jack's. Liv felt the trap closing. Killian seemed to sense it too. His expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle tensing, like a predator recognizing danger. "Everything's fine," he said calmly, addressing the room more than the person who'd asked. "Just needed to—" "Perez," Jack's voice cut through the noise like a gunshot. "My office. Now." The bar went silent. Liv's stomach dropped. Not now. Not here. Not in front of everyone. But Jack was already moving, pushing through the crowd toward her, his face flushed with 3 days of accumulated rage. "I said now," he repeated when she didn't immediately respond. "Mr. Jonas, I'm in the middle of—" "I don't care what you're in the middle of." Jack reached her in 4 long strides. "We're done playing games. You've had 3 warnings. 3. And you're still—" He gestured angrily toward table 7, toward Killian, toward the evidence of her disobedience. "I'm doing my job," Liv said, her voice steady despite the fear climbing her spine. "That's all I'm—" "Your job is what I say it is." Jack's hand shot out. His fingers twisted in the collar of her uniform, his other hand gripping her shoulder. Before Liv could react, he shoved her backward hard, sending her stumbling until her spine hit the wooden pillar near the bar. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. Jack followed, his face inches from hers now, his grip painful, his voice rising above the shocked silence of the bar. "Do you understand me now?" He snarled, his fingers digging into the fabric at her throat. "Is this clear enough for you?" Liv's hands pressed flat against the pillar behind her. Her breathing came in short gasps, not from fear, though fear was there, but from the effort of staying calm, of not crying, of not breaking in front of all these witnesses. The entire tavern held its breath. Somewhere behind Jack, a chair moved. The sound was quiet, deliberate, almost casual. But in the silence of Rose's tavern, it sounded like thunder. Jack's grip loosened slightly. His eyes shifted, confusion flickering across his face. Killian Waters stood up slowly, his movements unhurried, his expression unreadable, and the entire room understood. This was the moment everything would change. Killian didn't rush. That was the first thing Jack noticed, the deliberate slowness of it. The way Killian rose from his chair like he had all the time in the world. Like the packed Friday night crowd didn't exist. Like nothing mattered except the man currently holding Liv against a pillar. The second thing Jack noticed was the silence. Complete. Absolute. The kind of quiet that shouldn't exist in a bar with 60 people packed into it. The jukebox had finished its song, and no one moved to select another. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the kitchen noise from the back seemed to fade. Jack's fingers were still twisted in Liv's collar when Killian took his first step forward. "Let her go," Killian said. His voice wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. In the silence, it carried across the entire room with perfect clarity. Jack's grip tightened reflexively. "This is none of your business. I'm making it my business." "Then you're making a mistake." Jack finally released Liv, turning to face Killian fully, squaring his shoulders. He still had 2 inches of height and 30 pounds of muscle on the man approaching him. That should mean something. "I'm the manager here. She's my employee. What happens between us is over." Killian stopped 6 feet away, close enough to be threatening, far enough to give Jack a chance to make the right choice. He wouldn't take it. They both knew that. Jack laughed sharp, dismissive, designed to reassert authority through contempt. "You think you scare me? You think because you sit in the corner wearing expensive suits and acting mysterious that I'm supposed to be impressed?" "No." Killian's expression didn't change. "I think you're supposed to be smart, but you've proven me wrong. Get out." Jack pointed toward the door, his voice rising. "Get out of my bar before I throw you out myself." "Your bar?" Killian's eyebrow lifted slightly. Interesting claim. Something in his tone made Jack hesitate, made the confidence in his voice waver just enough to be noticeable. "I manage it," Jack corrected, though his certainty was cracking. "Which means I decide who stays and who goes. And you. Touch her again." Killian interrupted quietly. "And what happens next won't be a conversation." The threat hung in the air, not shouted, not theatrical, just stated as simple fact. Jack's face flushed dark red. "That a threat? A promise?" "Yeah?" Jack took a step forward, closing the distance, putting himself in Killian's space the way he'd done to Liv. Intimidation through physicality, dominance through size. "You want to make this physical? You really want to go there in front of all these witnesses?" Killian smiled. It was the most terrifying expression Liv had ever seen, not because it was cruel, but because it was genuine. Like Jack had just told an excellent joke. "Witnesses," Killian repeated. "Is that what you think they are? What else would they?" That's when Liv noticed the changes happening around the room. The 2 men who'd been sitting with Killian had risen from table 7. They weren't approaching, weren't threatening, just standing, positioned between the crowd and the confrontation. Near the front entrance, a man in a dark jacket had appeared. Liv hadn't seen him enter, didn't remember seeing him in the bar at all, but now he stood by the door, hands in his pockets, expression neutral. Another man near the back hallway, another by the kitchen entrance. All watching Jack with the same patient attention, all waiting. Jack saw them too. His eyes darted between the stationed figures, confusion shifting to something that might have been fear. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "Education," Killian said simply. "Something you should have gotten before you put your hands on people." "I didn't. She's just a waitress." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Killian took 1 step closer. Just 1. But the effect was seismic. "Say that again," he said softly. "Please." Jack's mouth opened, closed. His bravado was evaporating in real time, replaced by the dawning realization that he'd miscalculated something fundamental. "She's a person," Killian continued, his voice still quiet, still calm. "She has a name, a life, responsibilities you know nothing about, and you put your hands on her not once, but twice because you thought your title gave you permission. I was enforcing workplace. You were committing assault." Killian's eyes were black ice. "In front of 60 witnesses who will all remember what they saw here tonight." Jack looked around desperately, seeking support, finding none. Every face in the bar showed some variation of the same expression. Horror, disgust, pity for Liv. None for him. "This is insane," Jack muttered. "You can't just who do you think you are?" Killian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the bar, where Tommy stood frozen, dish towel in hand. "Tommy," Killian said conversationally. "You've worked here how long?" Tommy's voice came out rough. 15 years. "Good man. Reliable. The owner trusts you, doesn't he?" Yes, sir." "Call him." Killian's attention returned to Jack. "Tell him to come down here. Now. There's something he needs to see." Jack's face went pale. "You can't, he hired me. To manage his business, not to assault his staff." Killian took another step forward. Now he was close enough that Jack had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. "You have 3 seconds to apologize to Miss Perez. Sincerely. On your knees. Then you're going to walk out that door and never come back." "I'm not apologizing to." Killian nodded once. Everything happened so fast Liv almost missed it. 2 of Killian's men moved in from opposite sides. Before Jack could react, they had his arms pinned behind him. A third kicked the back of his knee, not hard, just enough to buckle his leg. Jack went down heavily, his kneecap cracking against the wooden floor. He tried to struggle, but the grip on his arms was absolute. "Let me go!" Jack shouted, panic replacing anger now. "You can't, this is assault, I'll call the cops." "Please do." Killian knelt beside him, his voice still conversational. "Explain to them how you grabbed a woman half your size and slammed her into a pillar because she spoke to a customer. I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic." Jack's breathing came in ragged gasps. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Killian's expression hardened. "You don't touch my people. Ever. Do you understand?" "Your people?" Jack spat. "She's not." The grip on his arms tightened. Jack gasped in pain. "Do you understand?" "Yes." Jack's voice broke. "Yes, I understand." "Good." Killian stood, brushing invisible dust from his suit. He looked toward the bar. "Tommy, has the owner arrived yet?" "On his way," Tommy confirmed, phone still pressed to his ear. Killian nodded, then finally looked at Liv. She was still pressed against the pillar, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with shock. "You okay?" he asked gently. Liv managed a small nod. "That's all that matters," Killian said. Then he walked calmly back to table 7 and sat down. Jack remained on his knees on the wooden floor, held in place by 2 men whose grips hadn't loosened, despite his compliance. His face was flushed, humiliation mixing with rage, mixing with fear in equal, ugly measure. The bar remained frozen, 60 people bearing witness to a moment they'd replay in their minds for years. Some would remember it as justice, others as violence. All would remember it as the night they understood that Rose's Tavern existed under rules they'd never quite noticed before. Liv pushed away from the pillar, her legs unsteady but holding. She wrapped her arms around herself not from cold, but from the bone-deep shock that followed adrenaline. Her uniform collar was stretched where Jack had grabbed it. She could still feel the phantom pressure of his fingers. The front door opened. Robert Chen, the owner of Rose's Tavern, stepped inside. He was 63, gray-haired, dressed in the casual slacks and polo shirt of a man who'd been called away from a quiet Friday evening at home. His expression was confused as he entered until he saw Jack on the floor, the positioned men throughout his establishment, and Liv standing shell-shocked by the bar. His confusion transformed into something colder. "What happened here?" Robert's voice carried the authority of ownership, real authority, earned through decades, not demanded through intimidation. Tommy stepped forward. "Mr. Chen," Jack grabbed Liv, shoved her against the pillar, in front of everyone. Robert's eyes found Liv. "That true?" She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. Robert's jaw tightened. He looked at Jack, still restrained on the floor. "Let him up." The 2 men glanced at Killian, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. They released Jack's arms and stepped back. Jack scrambled to his feet, rubbing his wrists, his breathing ragged. "Robert, Mr. Chen, this isn't what it looks like. I was enforcing workplace standards." She was disobeying direct orders, talking to customers when I specifically told her not to. "So you put your hands on her?" "I was trying to get her attention. She wasn't listening." "So you assaulted her?" The word hung in the air like an accusation and a verdict simultaneously. Jack's mouth opened and closed. "It wasn't I didn't assault anyone. I grabbed her uniform. That's different. That's assault." Robert's voice was flat. "Final. In my establishment, in front of my customers, against one of the best employees I've ever had." "She was breaking the rules!" Jack's voice rose desperately. "Multiple times. I gave her 3 warnings, documented warnings, and she continued to disobey. What was I supposed to do?" "Fire her." Robert's response was immediate. "Write her up. Suspend her. Any of a dozen things that don't involve putting your goddamn hands on her." Jack looked around wildly, seeking support, finding none. "You hired me to manage this place, to enforce discipline, to maintain standards. I hired you to run a bar, not a prison." Robert moved closer, his anger barely controlled. "I hired you because your resume said you had experience, not because I wanted someone who thinks intimidation is leadership. I was trying to help your business." Jack's desperation was fully visible now. These people were running wild. No rules, no consequences. Chatting with customers instead of working, wasting time. Building relationships, Robert interrupted. That's how this business works, Jack. Regulars come here because they know the staff, because Liv remembers their orders, because Tommy asks about their kids. That's not wasting time, that's the entire business model. Jack's face contorted. So she gets to do whatever she wants? Break whatever rules she wants? Because she's been here longer? The only rule she broke, Killian said from table 7, his voice cutting through the argument like a blade, was refusing to accept abuse from someone who confused authority with power. Jack spun toward him. This is your fault. You started this. Coming in here, talking to her, undermining me. I ordered drinks. Killian's tone remained conversational. She brought them. That's called service. What you did is called something else entirely. You think you run this place? Jack's voice cracked. You think because you sit in your corner booth acting tough, that you have any say in how I manage my staff? Killian stood, slowly, with the same unhurried deliberation that had preceded everything else. I don't think anything, he said quietly. I know exactly how things work, and so does everyone else in this room now. He gestured to the silent crowd, couples at tables, regulars at the bar, staff members frozen in place, all watching, all understanding something Jack still refused to see. What you don't understand, Killian continued, walking forward, is that real power doesn't need to raise its voice, doesn't need to put hands on people who can't fight back. Real power speaks once and never needs to repeat itself. He stopped a few feet from Jack. Close enough to be personal, far enough to give Jack space to process. You mistook fear for respect, Killian said. You confused compliance with loyalty. You thought because people followed your rules that they agreed with them. And when someone quiet, professional, and more competent than you'll ever be refused to let you cross certain lines, you couldn't handle it. Jack's fists clenched. You don't know anything about me. I know you're unemployed. Killian's voice was matter-of-fact. As of approximately 3 minutes ago, Jack's eyes shot to Robert, who stood with his arms crossed, his expression carved from stone and disappointment. He's right, Robert said quietly. You're done, Jack. Effective immediately. You can't, I have a contract. Which includes a clause about workplace conduct. Robert pulled out his phone. I'm texting my lawyer right now, but honestly, I don't think you want this to go legal. Not with 60 witnesses who saw exactly what you did. Jack's face went pale. This is insane. I was doing my job. Your job was to manage people with respect. Robert's voice hardened. You failed, catastrophically. Now get your things from the office and leave. If you're still here in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. On what charges? Assault, trespassing, whatever my lawyer tells me will stick. Robert stepped closer, his voice dropping to something more dangerous. And Jack? If I hear you've badmouthed Liv, this bar, or anyone who works here to any other establishment in this district, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you never work in hospitality again. Are we clear? Jack's jaw worked, pride warring with survival instinct. Are we clear? Robert repeated. Crystal, Jack spat. He turned toward the office, his shoulders rigid with humiliation. The crowd parted silently, creating a pathway lined with judgment. Jack walked through it like a condemned man, his footsteps heavy against the wooden floor. The office door opened, slammed shut. 2 minutes later, it opened again. Jack emerged with his jacket and nothing else, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. He walked toward the exit, refusing to look at anyone. When he reached the door, he paused, turned. His eyes found Liv one last time. Hope he's worth it, Jack said, venom in every syllable. Then he left. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like an ending. The door clicked shut behind Jack Jonas, and for 3 full seconds, Rose's Tavern remained suspended in silence. Then someone coughed. A glass clinked. The spell broke. Conversation resumed, not loud, not comfortable, but present. Gradually, like blood returning to a limb that had fallen asleep, people turned back to their tables, their drinks, their companions. But the energy had changed. The entire room had witnessed something that would alter how they saw this place, these people, this ordinary Friday night. Liv remained by the pillar, her arms still wrapped around herself. Her hands had stopped shaking, but her breathing hadn't quite steadied. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving exhaustion in its wake, the bone-deep kind that came from holding yourself together when everything inside wanted to collapse. Robert Chen approached her slowly, his expression soft with concern. "Liv," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." She blinked at him. "You're sorry? I hired him. I should have vetted him better. Should have noticed the warning signs sooner." Robert's voice carried genuine regret. "This never should have happened. Not here. Not to you." Liv shook her head slightly. "You didn't know." "I should have." Robert glanced around the bar at his staff, his customers, his life's work. "This place is supposed to be safe. For everyone. And I let someone in who made it dangerous." "Mr. Chen, you're getting a raise," Robert interrupted. "Effective immediately. 20%. And Jack's tip-pooling nonsense is gone as of right now. Your tips are yours. Always have been. Always will be." Liv's throat tightened. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Robert squeezed her shoulder gently, the touch of a father, not a manager, then turned to address the room. "Everyone," he called out, his voice carrying across the tavern. "Drinks are on the house for the next hour. Food too. And I apologize for what you witnessed tonight. That's not who we are. That's not what Rose's Tavern stands for." A few people nodded. Someone said, "Thank you." The tension eased another degree. Robert looked at Tommy behind the bar. "Make sure everyone's taken care of." "Yes, sir." Then Robert crossed the floor to table 7. Liv watched from her position by the pillar as the owner of Rose's Tavern stood before Killian Waters, the man who'd just orchestrated the removal of his manager, using methods that existed somewhere in the gray space between protection and violence. "Mr. Waters," Robert said. Killian looked up from his seat, his expression neutral. "Mr. Chen, I don't know who you are." "Not really." Robert's voice was quiet, meant only for their table. "I don't know what you do, or why you have the kind of resources you clearly have, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to know." Killian said nothing, just waited. "But what you did tonight?" Robert paused, choosing his words carefully. "It probably saved Liv from something worse. Maybe saved other people Jack would have hurt down the line. So I'm saying thank you, even if I'm not entirely comfortable with how it happened." "The how doesn't matter," Killian replied quietly. "What matters is that she's safe." Robert studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Your money's no good here anymore. Ever. Anything you want, it's on the house. That's not necessary. It is to me." Robert extended his hand. Killian shook it, a brief, firm grip that sealed an understanding between two men who operated in very different worlds but recognized honor when they saw it. Robert returned to the bar, leaving Killian and his companions alone. Maria appeared at Liv's elbow, her eyes red-rimmed. "I should have said something. When he grabbed you the first time, I should have." "You couldn't have changed anything," Liv said quietly. "I could have stood with you, instead of being scared." Maria's voice broke slightly. "I'm so sorry, Liv." Liv pulled her into a hug, brief, tight, necessary. When they separated, Maria wiped her eyes and went back to her tables. Tommy approached next, carrying a glass of water he pressed into Liv's hand. "Drink," he ordered gently. She obeyed, the cold water grounding her back and her body. "You should go home," Tommy said. "I'll cover your section. I'm fine." "You're not, and that's okay." Tommy's weathered face showed concern etched from years of watching people. "Go home, hug your brother, get some sleep. This place will still be here tomorrow." Liv wanted to argue, wanted to prove she was strong enough to finish her shift, to not let what happened break her routine. But the truth was, she couldn't. Not tonight. Not with her hands still trembling and Jack's grip still phantom present on her collar. "Okay," she whispered. She untied her apron with shaking fingers, folded it carefully, muscle memory from 2 years of closing shifts, and set it on the bar. Then she walked toward the exit, trying to ignore the eyes that followed her, the whispers of sympathy and curiosity that trailed in her wake. She was almost to the door when Killian's voice stopped her. "Miss Perez." Liv turned. He'd risen from his seat and crossed half the distance between them. Up close, in the amber light of the bar, his tattoos seemed more intricate patterns that suggested precision, permanence, protection. "Are you okay?" he asked. The question was simple, direct, the same one he'd asked before. But this time, Liv couldn't just nod and move on. "I don't know," she admitted. "I think so. Maybe. I just—" She stopped, unsure how to articulate the chaos inside her. "You don't have to explain." Killian's voice was gentle in a way that surprised her. What happened tonight shouldn't have happened. And I'm sorry you had to experience it. You stopped it. I should have stopped it sooner. Liv shook her head. You couldn't have known. Not until tonight. I knew he was watching you too closely. Knew something was wrong. Killian's expression darkened slightly. I should have acted on that. Why? The question escaped before Liv could stop it. Why do you care? I'm nobody. Just a waitress who takes your order. Killian's eyes held hers, dark, serious, completely focused. You're not nobody, he said quietly. You're someone who shows up every day, works harder than anyone else in this room, and treats people with respect even when they don't deserve it. You're someone who takes care of her family without complaint. Someone who didn't break even when someone tried very hard to break you. Liv's breath caught. How do you know about my brother? I pay attention. Killian's expression softened imperceptibly. And people who work as hard as you do usually have a reason. Tears pricked Liv's eyes, not from fear or pain, but from being seen. Really seen. Not as invisible labor or a problem to be managed, but as a person whose life mattered. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Killian nodded once. Get home safe. And Miss Perez? Yes? If anyone bothers you, anyone at all, you tell me. Understood? It wasn't a request. It was a promise wrapped in protection, wrapped in something that felt almost like care. Liv nodded. Then she left Rose's tavern, stepping out into the cool January night, leaving behind the bar that had almost broken her, and the man who'd reminded everyone in that room what real power looked like. She pulled out her phone as she walked to her car, her fingers finding her brother's number. He answered on the second ring. Liv? You okay? You're calling early. I'm fine, she said, and for the first time that night, she almost believed it. I'm coming home. Everything's going to be okay. She didn't know if that was true. But standing under the streetlights, breathing the cold air, feeling the weight of the evening finally beginning to lift, she needed to believe it. So she did. By Saturday morning, Jack Jonas understood exactly how badly he'd miscalculated. He'd spent Friday night in his apartment, rage drinking cheap beer, and rehearsing the story he'd tell other bars when they called for references. He'd been wrongfully terminated, assaulted by customers, undermined by staff. The owner had no backbone. It wasn't his fault. By Saturday afternoon, that story was already dead. His phone buzzed with a text from Mitchell's Pub, a sports bar, 3 blocks from Rose's, where he'd applied 2 weeks ago as backup. They'd been interested, had said they'd call him after his trial period at Rose's ended. We've decided to go in a different direction. Good luck. No explanation, no interview, just rejection. Jack stared at the message, confusion giving way to unease. He opened his email. 2 more rejections from places he'd applied to over the past month. Both had come through in the last hour. He called Mitchell's directly. Hey, this is Jack Jonas. I just got your text, and I wanted to clarify. We're not interested, Mr. Jonas. The manager's voice was cold, professional, final. Can I ask why? You seemed enthusiastic when we talked last week. We received some information about your management style. It doesn't align with our workplace culture. Jack's stomach dropped. What information from who? I'm not at liberty to discuss that. Thank you for your interest. The line went dead. Jack sat in his living room, his phone gripped tight in his hand, the reality settling over him like ice water. Someone was spreading the word. Someone with reach. Someone who could make phone calls or send messages that mattered more than Jack's resume. He thought about the men stationed around Rose's tavern. The way they'd moved with precision. The way Killian Waters had orchestrated everything with barely a word. The way everyone had listened. Jack had called Killian a thug. A customer with delusions of importance. Someone who thought expensive suits made him special. But thugs didn't have the kind of network that could blacklist someone from every bar in a 3-mile radius by Saturday afternoon. Jack grabbed his laptop and started searching. Killian Waters. The name pulled up nothing useful. No LinkedIn, no Facebook, no public records beyond the bare minimum. A few business registrations tied to LLCs with vague names. Import, export, consulting, real estate investment. Nothing concrete. Nothing that explained anything. But in the comments section of a local restaurant review site, buried 3 pages deep, Jack found a single line that made his blood run cold. Great food, but be respectful to the staff. The owner has friends in low places. It wasn't about Rose's. It was about a different restaurant. But the implication was there. Friends in low places. Jack closed his laptop. He'd assaulted someone under mafia protection. The thought should have been ridiculous. This was a working-class neighborhood, not some movie about organized crime. People didn't get blacklisted for being bad managers. This was America. There were labor laws, legal protections. Except none of that mattered when the person you crossed had the kind of power that didn't show up in legal documents. Jack's phone buzzed again. Another text. This one from an unknown number. You've been given a gift, the opportunity to disappear quietly. Take it. If we hear you've spoken about Friday night to anyone, if you've badmouthed Liv Perez or Rosa's Tavern, if you've contacted any attorney about wrongful termination, the gift will be revoked. Do you understand? Jack's hands shook as he typed back. Who is this? The response came immediately. Someone who is being generous. Don't test that generosity. No threats. No explicit violence. Just the clear understanding that Jack's future depended on his silence. He thought about fighting, about going to the police, filing a complaint, pressing charges for assault against the men who'd restrained him. But what would he say? That he'd been fired after grabbing an employee? That customers had intervened? That the owner had sided with the staff over him? Any investigation would uncover what he'd done, would expose his 3 days of harassment, his physical aggression, his abuse of power. And beneath all that, Jack understood something more fundamental. People like Killian Waters didn't make empty threats. They made promises. Jack deleted the text thread. Then he opened his laptop again and started searching for jobs in other cities. Anywhere but here. Meanwhile, at Rosa's Tavern, the Saturday lunch shift was surprisingly busy. Word had spread about Friday night, not through social media or news reports, but through the old-fashioned network of neighborhood gossip. Regulars came in specifically to check on Liv, to show support, to make sure she knew she had people on her side. Liv worked her section with the same professional efficiency as always, but something had shifted. She smiled more easily, made eye contact more confidently, laughed at jokes without that underlying tension of wondering if she'd be punished for wasting time. Robert had made good on his promise. The new manager, a woman named Patricia who'd worked in hospitality for 20 years and understood that leadership wasn't about dominance, had started that morning. She'd introduced herself to the staff individually, asked about their concerns, and spent the first hour simply observing how the tavern operated. "I'm not here to change everything," Patricia told them during the pre-shift meeting. "I'm here to support what already works. And from what I can see, you all know your jobs better than I ever could. So let's work together." It was a radical concept after 3 days of Jack Jonas. Maria had hugged Liv when she arrived for her shift. "You okay? Really?" "I think so," Liv said, and she meant it. Tommy, the bartender, had nodded approvingly when he saw her. "Good to have you back. Good to be back." Killian arrived at his usual time, sat at his usual table, and ordered his usual drink. But when Liv brought it over, he looked up at her with something that might have been concern. "How are you?" he asked. "Better," Liv answered honestly. "Thank you." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded, satisfied. "Good." "Mr. Waters." Liv hesitated, unsure how to articulate what she wanted to say. "What you did Friday. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me." "I do, though. You didn't have to." "Yes," Killian interrupted gently. "I did. Some things aren't optional." Liv didn't fully understand what he meant, but she understood enough. "Well," she said softly, "thank you anyway." He inclined his head, a small gesture of acknowledgement. Liv returned to her other tables, her step a little lighter, and across the bar, 60 witnesses to Friday night's confrontation ate their meals and drank their drinks, and carried with them a story they'd tell for years. About the night a quiet waitress stood her ground, and the night real power reminded everyone what it looked like. Sunday morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of January day where sunlight made everything look sharper, cleaner, full of possibility. Liv woke before her alarm, which almost never happened. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the sounds of the apartment building waking up around her footsteps above, pipes groaning, someone's muffled radio playing old salsa music. Her body ached in unfamiliar places. The adrenaline crash from Friday had left her muscles sore, her mind fuzzy. But underneath the exhaustion was something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time: relief. She got up, showered, and made breakfast. Tommy, her brother, not the bartender, emerged from his room at 8:30, yawning and stretching. "You're up early," he observed, dropping into his chair. "You okay?" "Yeah," Liv slid eggs onto his plate. Actually, I am. Tommy studied her face with the careful attention of someone who'd spent 5 years learning to read his sister's moods. Something happened. Something did. Liv sat across from him. But it's handled now. Handled how? She considered how much to tell him. 17 was old enough to understand that the world wasn't always fair, that power structures existed beyond classrooms and job titles. But he was also still young enough to want to fix things, to get angry on her behalf in ways that wouldn't help. There was a problem at work, Liv said carefully. The new manager was difficult, but the owner took care of it. I'm getting a raise, actually. Tommy's eyes narrowed. What kind of difficult? The kind that doesn't matter anymore. Liv's voice was firm. He's gone. I'm staying. Everything's fine. Liv. Tommy. She reached across and squeezed his hand. I promise. It's handled. And I'm okay. He didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded. Okay. But if anyone messes with you again? You'll what? Fight them? Liv smiled despite herself. You're 17, and you have a chemistry test to worry about. Not my problems. You're my sister. Your problems are my problems. The fierce protectiveness in his voice reminded Liv why she worked double shifts, why she swallowed her pride, why she'd endured 3 days of Jack Jonas's harassment before the situation exploded. This person sitting across from her, who still needed stability and safety and the space to just be a kid for a little while longer. I love you, Liv said quietly. Tommy's expression softened. Love you too. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, the morning sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, the world feeling just a little bit safer than it had 3 days ago. By Sunday evening, Liv was back at Rosa's Tavern for her regular shift. The bar had settled back into its familiar rhythm. Regulars at their usual tables. Tommy behind the bar, mixing drinks with the efficiency of 15 years' practice. Maria working her section with renewed confidence. Patricia observing from a respectful distance, learning the flow without disrupting it. Liv moved through her tables with practiced ease, but something fundamental had changed in how people interacted with her. Customers made eye contact when they thanked her, said please without prompting, tipped generously and consistently. The ones who'd been present Friday night treated her with a kind of reverent respect, not pity, but acknowledgement that she'd survived something difficult and come back stronger. At 7:15, Killian Waters arrived. He wore a different suit, charcoal gray this time, still perfectly tailored, and he carried himself with the same quiet authority that had always marked his presence. He sat at table 7. Liv approached with her notepad, a small smile on her face. Evening, Mr. Waters. The usual? Please. He looked up at her, his dark eyes assessing. How are you doing? Really? Really? Liv considered the question seriously. I'm good. Sore. Tired. But good. Your brother? The question surprised her. He's fine. Worried about me, but fine. Killian nodded. Good. That's good. Liv hesitated, then asked the question that had been circling her mind all weekend. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you help me? I know you said you pay attention, but... She struggled for the right words. People don't usually intervene like that, especially not for people like me. People like you, Killian repeated slowly. You mean people who work hard, who take care of their families, who treat others with respect even when they're being disrespected. I mean people who don't matter much in the grand scheme of things. Killian's expression hardened slightly, not at her, but at the sentiment. You matter, Miss Perez. More than you know. But you don't even know me. I know enough. He leaned back in his chair, his voice taking on a contemplative quality. I know you show up every day even when it's hard. I know you smile at customers who probably don't deserve it. I know you send most of your money home to take care of a brother who's lucky to have you. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Liv's throat tightened. That's just being responsible. No, that's being exceptional. Most people wouldn't do what you do. Most people would have quit, or fought back, or broken down under the pressure Jack Jonas was applying. Killian's eyes held hers. You didn't. You stayed calm. You maintained your dignity. And you kept showing up. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. You chose to survive with grace. That's not nothing. Liv didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever articulated her daily reality as something worthy of respect before. It was just what she did. What she had to do. I've seen a lot of people in my life, Miss Perez, Killian continued quietly. People who claim to be strong but crumble under the smallest pressure. People who demand respect but never earn it. People who confuse volume with power, aggression with authority. He paused. You're not like them. You're the real thing, and people like you deserve to be protected. Protected by the mafia? The words slipped out before Liv could stop them. Killian smiled, a genuine one this time. Is that what you think I am? I don't know what you are, Liv admitted. But I know you're not just a regular customer. No, Killian agreed. I'm not. But what I am doesn't change why I helped you. Some things are just right. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. Some people shouldn't be allowed to hurt others without consequences. He said it so simply, as if basic human decency was a revolutionary concept. Maybe, in some ways, it was. Your order, Liv said, needing to return to familiar ground. I'll get that for you. Thank you, Miss Perez. She walked back to the bar, her mind churning with everything Killian had said. Tommy caught her eye as she entered the drink order. You two have an interesting relationship, the bartender observed. We don't have a relationship, Liv corrected. I serve him drinks, that's all. Right. And he just happened to orchestrate the removal of your abusive manager out of the goodness of his heart. Liv didn't respond, because the truth was she didn't fully understand it either. But as the evening wore on, as she served her tables and navigated the familiar rhythms of Rosa's tavern, Liv found herself thinking about what Killian had said. You matter more than you know. She'd spent 5 years believing that survival meant making herself small, invisible, unimportant enough to be overlooked by people who might hurt her. But maybe that wasn't the only way. Maybe quiet strength didn't mean disappearing. Maybe it meant standing firm even when the world pushed back. Maybe it meant maintaining dignity when others tried to strip it away. Maybe it meant showing up every single day and refusing to let circumstances break you. At closing time, after the last customer had left and the chairs were stacked and the floors were swept, Liv untied her apron and looked around Rosa's tavern. This place had almost broken her, had put her in the path of someone who believed power came from intimidation, but it had also shown her that real power looked different. Real power didn't shout, didn't grab, didn't demand submission. Real power stood up slowly from a corner booth and said 3 words that changed everything. Take your hands off her. Real power protected without asking for anything in return. Real power recognized dignity in places others overlooked. Liv pulled on her jacket and headed for the door. Patricia called after her. See you tomorrow, Liv. See you tomorrow, Liv replied, and she meant it. Because tomorrow she'd come back. She'd work her tables. She'd serve Killian Waters his usual drink. She'd send money home to her brother and pay her bills, and keep surviving with the same quiet strength that had carried her through 5 years of impossible choices. But now she'd survive with something else too. The knowledge that some people saw her, really saw her, and believed she mattered. That was worth more than any raise, worth more than any apology Jack Jonas would never give, worth everything. Liv stepped out into the cold January night, the door to Rosa's tavern closing softly behind her, and walked toward her car with her head high and her heart lighter than it had been in years. Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.